Yeah,
Welcome back to the Disrupt Education podcast. We are full summer mode. And how are you, Allie? What's going on?
I'm good. This is a throwback comment if you listen to previous episodes, but this morning I had the joy and pleasure of eating waffles for uh, full summer mode. If you didn't catch our summer kicking off summer episode from early June, yeah, go back and listen to
I bought spaghetti yesterday. I'll just say I didn't have it for breakfast though. So
probably for the best. Probably for the best.
we should make a game out of this because that's what we're talking about today, kind of bouncing off the Elliot Mack episode and talking about esports and such like that. Okay, so in our previous conversation right before we started recording, you said you were a gamer. What
I,
game? Let's go. What games? Because for me, I'm like Atari way back in the day, so kind of old.
I'm You're right. I'm your classics, like 90s, 2000 gamer. I grew up, like on Game Boy.
Hmm.
I was a big Pokemon player. I do still have my original red version with all 150 Pokemon. Um, that still exists.
Nice.
But I mean, I really was a big gamer. I um played Warcraft and
Mhm.
PlayStation and Counter-Strike. That's like before Halo and everything.
Yeah, right.
Um, right, yeah, I know. So I'm not like a new age gamer. I like the classics. I was a big into I loved Mario Party and Super Mario Kart and N64 games and everything. And it's it's interesting because I also did classical sports. I don't want to say that esports isn't, a sport, but the ones people traditionally think of when they think of sports. I was a very eclectic in I just loved all of those areas of school,
Hmm.
right? Like the academics, the actual physical, I played volleyball, and then also in my free time, I would also go and game with my friends. It was interesting when Elliot was talking about this, how esports and having like these after school communities of gamers catches people who don't necessarily like the traditional sports. And then I don't remember the exact statistic that he said off the top of my head, but all I know is that it was a high percentage, like in the 80s or 90s, right,
Hmm.
of kids who already game
Yeah.
and just directing that into a more kind of, I don't want to say standardized, but like giving them a space to grow with the gaming and also network. I mean, some of my great friends from high school and childhood were made through games, whether they were games on a screen or not games on a screen. But now, I mean, online gaming and whatnot is even more prolific than when you and I were growing up in the kind of virtual game reality.
Right. Right. Yes, I will attach to your decade on this. But it is interesting. I mean, we used to have I'll go way back. I remember when my uncle pulled out the Atari 2600 and we were like, what is that? My parents had Pong. Like they had the old console so you can see it. I live in Brookfield, Illinois, and we do have one of the biggest, like old school big game places called Galloping Ghost. It's, I think, the largest in the nation, where you just pay like $20 and you can, play all the quarter games. Like we used to go and do that. But then the home pieces, yeah, they evolved. I had a Commodore 64 with the floppy disks, the things that the kids say, what is that? Like a 3D save button, So it's actually is that a 3D rendering of, yes, it is. But yeah, I mean, we used to like trade games and do different things like that. So you can kind of see where everything started to evolve. Networking, I know that Elliot was talking about that, how it brings students together and well, anybody together. And now where you could put on the headset and I could talk to somebody in England while I'm playing here. And he's obviously in, I think, Copenhagen and working all around the world. That becomes very interesting. And I think one of the most interesting things from the conversation that came with me was then how, like you said, how do we harness that and then just try to still have fun? It goes back to bringing summer into the classroom, but how do you still have fun but then learn, and I always struggle with that because I have one of the kids of the two on the team who won. It was Mario Kart, the state championship in Illinois. And we were building his spike view out, and he was still kind of struggling with, like, no, it's not really a skill, but it is. And so when I had to start talking to him, so that was another intriguing piece with Elliot, is he was talking about, okay, where do we take this next? Which I love that attitude. So I don't know. Do you feel like you pulled any skills from the Pokemon and all that? And I want to ask
I'm
about the Pokemon Go too, right? Because they did kind of like, all right,
oh
we'll get your
yeah.
butt outside, and then you had to go find things. I thought that was
I,
cool. I never really played it, but
I never got into the Pokemon Go. That was on like
mhm,
the Nintendo Switch or
yeah,
and whatnot. But right, that was a time to be outside, and
mhm,
it got kind of the renaissance right during COVID because it came
right,
out before,
yeah,
and then it had the renaissance because people were like, oh well, I can go outside and catch Pokemon. I can't, and it's social distancing.
yeah,
In terms of the skills from gaming, I think there are quote unquote like hacks, not cheats, but it is paying attention to details and um, you know, figuring out what moves you have to do in order to, get the prize. And there is a lot of problem solving. The thing with gaming that I always enjoyed as a kid and then even as a teacher, some of the concepts that I would teach, I would use online platforms that would gamify, is that instantaneous feedback. And that's what makes it so, it can be, you can hear the bad side of any kind of screen time, can be
mhm,
addictive because it brings you in visually. It has that high flicker rate, and then you're constantly trying to get better or get to the next stage, or so there's always like something else, which is, if you're using it to build a skill set, is good. In terms of that perseverance, patience, you know, and I mean, I know that I would have to like reference other people or go online and look at forums for, like for the Pokemon, like where can I find this Ponyta Pokemon, and
mhm,
it's in this one grassy knoll in this one area on this, somebody had found it, so it seems simple, but it can focus and direct you towards an outcome, towards a goal, which if
mhm,
you're working on a project in, quote unquote, the real world, a lot of that is transferable. Like, oh, you have to have this deliverable. You might need to talk to people. You might have to like go to this one spot. You might have to do something over and over again. You're going to have to put something together. All of those skills, it's just a matter of, are those transferable skills to your student, right, being shown? Like they're like, oh, okay, I can race on Super Mario. Great. How does that transfer? Is that really a skill?
mhm.
It's how you view it. And so having a mentor, a teacher, somebody helping you with that can kind of help you see it, for not like, okay, I'm gonna go play Super Mario for 8 hours and just not do anything else. But, you know, if you have like a goal you're working towards, I can, and the
Mhm.
team building aspect that Elliot's work is doing there.
Yeah,
And that can all help someone move forward through an online gaming
yeah,
system.
yeah. I like to just sit around and play Mario Kart for 8 hours and eat Doritos and drink Dr. Pepper all day. we used to, like, that was the thing back in the day. You do the overnight, right? Like you'd
Absolutely.
start, yeah. And but you know, I started to think about simulators, right? So my son, is now actually setting up the steering wheel and everything for my daughter who's in driver's ed, because my son actually learned how to drive a manual transmission on his computer before he got into the car. And he had the pedals and everything.
Wow.
Now my daughter, she's like, I don't want the manual train. I just want to drive, and see, rules of the road or whatever, which is fine. But when he did get in a car, like I was the first in the car with him, and he only stalled it once, and the rest was history. So, and he does have a manual transmission. So you think about things like that. I was just at a festival over last weekend, and I was talking. I have a good friend who's a United pilot, and we were just talking about simulators and different things like that. And he said something very interesting. There's, you think about the gaming aspect. Like all of us can get into any kind of aircraft right now on our computers. Whether you have to pay for the simulation or not, I don't know, but like I know they're out there. So but he was talking about, and I still have to take my son to like a 737 simulator, which is the real deal, where they put you in the cockpit. It's not like a screen like we have here. Um, but then he was like, also, okay, that's great. But he's like, don't forget, if you really want to see if anybody wants to become a pilot, what I suggest is to get them that $150 $1 hour, get out in a Cessna, go up with a coach or a flight instructor, and if you'll know. He's like, you're either gonna say, nah, this isn't for me, or boom, this is for me. So you kind of go back to your first jump. Yes, you see the light click on. So there was this kind of, and I thought that was interesting, and kind of reflecting on Elliot's conversations about, like, in our conversations about reality and the gaming or the simulation. I think that schools can do a lot better job of actually connecting those two, and we can kind of start seeing, okay, well, here's the real life. Here's what you did with the simulation. I'm going to stay on aircraft because the aircraft controller, right? The traffic controller, like there's games where you can kind of move things around. If you make a mistake, guess what? People don't die, it's okay, but like, but it can actually train you, like you're doing this and you're like, wait, like I can really see, you get on a flight radar, you start to see what's happening. I'm totally geeking out, like, you were about, food the other day, but like, but like, you know what I'm saying? So it's like, I think those are the kind of things that, and then we can give a lot of those experiences, a lot more experiences to students digitally like that. And then even on top of those skills, we can go into, are there careers out there? Can you get jobs? Can you get, I know you can get scholarships, but what are the other things that you can do with that? So I thought that was very interesting.
The idea of this virtual simulation to experience and try something, because if you don't even like it at that point, most likely it probably won't like it in real life, if a simulation. So there is power in this idea of, an augmented reality for kind of dipping your toe in the water of something, seeing if you even like it in a, a non-real
Right.
life scenario. But I do like the point that you're touching on here with, get someone in an actual pilot seat, or whatever the experience is. Like if you want to be a chef, like
Mm-hmm.
cool, you're making all this food simulation. Do you actually like the mess and the physical chopping and dicing and preparation in real life? I mean, just as another example, you may like it in a simulation, you may not like it in real life.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? But it could just, like you said, it could help uh give exposure and give kids, this taste test of what they're doing. But one of the things we were kind of mentioning before, and I would be doing a disservice to educators who kind of have this feeling that more screen time maybe isn't the way to go, because I will say that I lean towards the in real life, real time, non-augmented experiences are best for a lot of learning. And so not pushing screens so much, like if you're an educator feeling like, oh my gosh, now I need to add more tech and more simulations, that I would say no, you do not have to. Absolutely not. And I think there are plenty of um, learning experiences that you don't need a screen for, and actually students benefit from that in real time, in real life. And I don't think you need to be either or, but
Mhm.
I feel like we would be doing a disservice to our audience and students and educators if we are like feeling like, okay, esports and online learning is a tool in a big toolbox, but
Mhm.
it's not the only tool, the only tools, because when you're saying, oh, what did you learn from all these games? I actually, let's just add in another element here. I played Dungeons and Dragons. Like
Solid.
I was
Like the dice, like you're like the
yes, yes,
nice.
yes,
Okay.
not simulated. And I
Got
will
it.
say, I mean, I would play that every Sunday
Hmm.
afternoon that I was available with my crew of people. And that I have more memories, and the types of role playing you have to do in the character, and
Hmm.
we were very theatrical with it, because we had built this camaraderie and trust with each other to
Yep.
then engage with these characters that we played for years together. And that I remember infinitely more. Like I can remember playing on my Game Boy and playing N64, and there's eating the Doritos and all of this. But the in real time gaming, I mean, I just played all weekend the original Game of Life, the board game.
Oh wow. Yeah.
No screens, right?
Yep.
And it was this very meta experience of like it was like you they have fire insurance, which I don't even know if that's a thing anymore, but it's like you roll the dice and it was like you're reckless, lose your fire insurance, and I'm like, what? And that's like the game of life. It just gives you random stuff that you don't even realize.
Ellie dropped a cigarette in her bed and just burned down the house.
Apparently, but I don't know. There's something about breaking bread with someone and this in real life that
Hmm.
schools can also lean into.
Yeah.
And um the esports is great and does capture, like, right, it can bring people together. I think some of
Hmm.
the people that I met, online, ended up being, in real, like me and you, we've never met, but we also do spend quality in real time conversations
Right.
together.
Hmm.
And so our experience is being helped by technology
Right.
and aiding it, but it's not the end all be all
Right.
thing. So I had to share that.
Yeah, no, I like that. In some of our econ classes we'll play like Monopoly. We play it in sociology. I know one of my good friends who also teaches, and he gives people certain situations, you like, he doesn't play it like, the board game should be played. He's like, you are in this class of socioeconomics, and they'll give them more money and less, and see how they actually play it out, and then they have the conversation with it, so that's real time. Even with like esports, um, there is a coach, right? Like, I mean, we have a coach, and where one of the things that great, and I know Elliot's doing this, and I also know, we have a few other people, especially in our school, that what they do is they and kids don't like to do this. A lot of people don't like to reflect sometimes, but like to slow it down. So after you play the game, like you go back and you either watch film and you talk about it, or you think about volleyball. I mean, there's a volleyball player, and he was in the back of one of the other classes all the time when he come in, and he would just watch his game, like, and try to analyze. But I think that's where the interesting part is where do you reflect, because you are like, it is kind of a real time while, you're there, you're talking to each other. You might be talking a little smack to the people online, but you're talking to each other. And I go back to, one of my favorite educators who has since passed. His name is Brian Davis. Um, we used to play, he was the video game club, and the kids would come in, and like you said, it was a social place for them to kind of work. But we would play teams in the classroom, and then afterwards we were like, oh, did you see, man, your helicopter got shot down? It was like, war games and such. But it was, but I like the fact of obviously the board games as well. We play in COVID, like we would play games with our other couple friends, like virtually. I remember we were actually playing the game on, it was like a trivia game and different things like that. But even in hands, we'll play like King's Corner or Gin Rummy and all these, card games. And then you just, you conversate, you cook, so it becomes an event.
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned Dungeons and Dragons. I actually played a little bit of Dungeons and Dragons. I always was so in awe of the dice. I'm like, there's a die. It's got 40 different. How do they do that? And then, but I remember there was, I think it was in television or something like that, had a digital version of it, and it was more solo. And we beat the game one time, and I was at my grandparents, and we were like, oh my gosh, we beat the game. But I also remember just maybe 3-4 years ago, right before COVID, there were students just like you who did meet on Sundays, and they would play and they would create their own maps. They would do all kinds of things. And they were starting, like, I don't know if it was a podcast or a YouTube channel, because they were like, oh my gosh, you listen to this person on Dungeons and Dragons. And there was like all these kind of, and I'm like, I was kind of pushing them like, well, you go ahead and do that. Right. And they started it, and then we ran into COVID. But I think, again, that's where an interest, and
Yeah.
I mean, these kids are built, I mean, you've probably seen it, like they're building maps that are like, I'm like, what the heck, man? Like, that is amazing. They would be drawing them out and digitizing them and doing all different kinds of things with them. And then they were able to talk about it. And that's one thing, like, if gaming is your thing, or whatever your thing is, just meeting people and talking about it is so important. And I think that's another thing that Elliot was doing across Europe and Asia, in trying to connect. And then now, like, I like that next step. Can we go? Can we travel places? Can we, obviously we'll have the online events, but then what can we learn from your culture? What can we learn from different people in this? Because yeah, there's all I knew is the crew that, and this was at Glenbard East when I was there, that played Dungeons and Dragons. There was like 6, and they were totally different, Allie. Like, not two of them weren't the same. Like, they all had different, like, ways that they dressed. They had different ways, that different interests. I don't know. What was your group like there?
Very eclectic, and it just brought people together, and that's what made it really interesting. And I do think that on any kind of quote unquote traditional sports team or an online esports type scenario, the community building is huge.
Mm-hmm.
And exploring interest with others, you know, it, I that's what life is all about and what learning is all about. You'll always be interested um in new things, new hobbies, new experiences, but I bet you'll find that the ones that you keep coming back to are the ones that are around communities, and that is something that I really do like of what Elliot and Daigon are doing with theirs. They're trying to capture potentially a community list
Mm-hmm.
area and bringing and kind of creating purpose around that and intentionality. And I think anything like that, whether it's on a screen or not, is good work, and education can kind of lean into that. I know that my most successful classes were the ones that, for whatever roll of the dice, had more community builders as student leaders in them.
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's only at some point there's only so much as an educator that you can do to create community. Sometimes it is the players that are also in the game, in the class, right? Like
Right.
what they bring to it. You know, you'd have some, I can remember having some classes where it was like everyone was so fixated on getting a really good grade, and it was like they brought all this stress and they couldn't just like relax and really even help each other because they were so siloed in their own world. And if you have people who can kind of they can be called, you know, your jokesters or your, you know, they can kind of throw in random questions, and but they are usually the most inclusive. They make situations that would otherwise be maybe tense like really laughable, and they're really good at bringing people together.
Hmm.
And those types of communities, I mean, you when they happen in the classroom, they're so magical.
Yeah.
You're like, I love this hour. I love teaching this class. And at some point you realize it's because it's so community. Everybody
Hmm.
really, really, anybody can work with anybody. Everyone's so inclusive, and they're in it together.
Right.
Nobody's in it for themselves. And that's a cool area on education to kind of create more and more spaces like that.
Yeah.
Um, and more, you know, if you're developing those types of community building skills, they transfer in the classroom, they transfer in real life. And
Hmm.
sometimes when you're in an interview or you're at a job and you're working with someone and they're so, you don't even know why. You just love working with them. It's
Right.
probably because they're good at relationship and just and and not just always so focused on the work and doing their tasks that they can break bread, they can, you know, have a laugh, they, you know, you can talk about life and learning, and there's just that it's an intangible, but when you meet someone you're like, I know that I just connect with them.
Hmm.
So
Yeah.
those are some
But
areas that can
you
help.
mentioned something very interesting in there, and what I heard is like, when we're looking for the grade and it becomes like a lonely kind of thing. You know, when you're in a situation where there's games or challenges or simulations where there's levels, right? So there's just these small levels and you keep going, and of course you always have the person who's got like 4,000 levels and they're awesome. um but kind of to your point of what I see in that one person or a couple people who are just the community builders is somebody struggling to get past the first or second level. They're not looking at the overall quote unquote grade of the game. They're looking at, okay, I need to get past this one level. And then that person comes over and helps them, right? And says, well, you can do this, and this is how I did it. It takes some practice, stick with it. That, those are your community builders you're talking about. And I've seen them in classrooms, on simulations and games and different things like that. And those make the best teams, right? Those make the best learning environments. And I like that, because what you said there was they're not focused on, I want to be ranked number 10 or better. I just want to get past level 2. And then once they do it, now they keep going, but they're able to, well, the experts or the better people in the room at that time are teaching. And what's the best way to learn? You're helping out and you're teaching. So I think that's a great analogy. Well, let's wrap this one up. I was going to try to do a game thing in my head. I don't know, but that's my
Add
spaghetti
it
and
in.
waffles. But what are your final thoughts, or your game over thoughts, on this
Mm.
episode?
Do do do. The one thing, this is going back to your airplane and discussion, because so as a skydiver, and I skydiver who jumps out of Cessna airplanes,
Yep.
we're not a turbine drop zone, if you know anybody listening knows the difference. So I get into and jump out of Cessna airplanes. So if there's anyone out there that is like, I really want to be a pilot and I want to learn in a Cessna, there are drop zones out there, which if you do enjoy that, that they love pilots who want to fly and then let go of, watch the skydivers jump out of the plane. So maybe skydiving isn't for you, but maybe you want to be a pilot. And I just say that because it's like you just never know where these simulations and stuff can take you. And Cessna airplanes are really fun to fly in. and jump out of, but the pilot should not jump out of it.
That'll land you in prison. I saw that one guy who tried to do it for YouTube, right? And he yeah. So don't do that.
Don't do that. That's not a game in real life you want to play.
Yeah, right. So no, I love it. We came full circle, gaming, real life. Yeah. So if you didn't hear the episode with Elliot, Mack, and Daigon, you can take a look at that right before this one. There's a lot to learn there. I think we're going into a very interesting space there. I think he's creating something there as well. We're going to wrap up today. Thank you all for listening. For Alli Privet, I'm Peter Hostrasser. Hey, we'll catch you next time on the Disrupt Education Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on this week's episode of the Disrupt Education Podcast. Be sure to like and subscribe so you never miss an episode.
Are you ready to disrupt the educational arena you're a part of? For more ways to get involved in the work we do here at Disrupt Education, check us out at disrupteducation.co. or find us on LinkedIn at Peter Hostrasser or Alli Privet.
Our mission here is to help facilitate and amplify changes in the educational system through local initiatives and help you scale them into community movements. Our building network of disruptors in education are working to move beyond scores and grades as the only measure for student learning. If your school district, college, campus, or organization is looking for facilitators of this work, reach out on our website or social media.
And if you have any thoughts or feedback on this week's episode or any episode, we'd love to hear from you. Until next time, keep pushing the boundaries, taking risks, and most importantly, disrupting education.